Thank you, sir.
Andrew Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to be talking on this bill. It has been fascinating listening to it, Mr. Speaker. I've got to say at the outset that I think Mr. Parker has been very genuine in bringing this bill to the House. And I think no one in this House would disagree with the general intent that any worker in New Zealand should be entitled to a fair remuneration and pay. That cuts across everything, and everyone in this House, including National, who stood behind it, believe in that same principle. However, Mr. Speaker, this issue around how this bill's been framed, I think, has some issues. And I think one of the things, it's been a very confusing debate, partly because we've had a number of members talk tonight who haven't been party to the ongoing discussions around the nature of this bill. I've heard some very confusing arguments, particularly in relation to what it means to employees. And actually what they mean is in terms of contractors, and vice versa, what it means for contractors when in fact they're employees. And I think that's a very important part to this debate, and I think that lack of clarity around what we're dealing with. So broadly we have three categories. We have employees, we have contractors who are basically in full-time employment contracts, and we have the temporary or semi-permanent contractors working on a part-time basis. And to sit here and hear that National's not worried about all of this and we're, uncaring and all that sort of stuff is simply codswallop. That's right. It's codswallop, Mr. Speaker, because from this Parliament and this government, we have passed a number of changes to the employment and contracting relationships. But the most recent one, of course, is we passed the bill around stopping zero-hour contracts. We do want to strengthen the relationship and to make sure that we do have a fair system between employers and employees and in contractors. And also some of the things we've done around the employment rights are very important. And I absolutely dispute the allegation that we do not worry about minimum wage, because since this government has been in power, since 2008, I hasten to add that without exception every year we have pushed up the minimum wage by 50 cents up to $15.25. And now I hear a member over here going, whoopsie-doo. Well, that's the issue. That is the issue, Mr. Speaker. Because one is about making sure that employees and contractors get fair reward, but also it is about making sure that employers are still prepared to offer the jobs. And that balance is the critical part of what we're talking about tonight. So where this whole issue about vulnerable employees, I think there is a point about it, and that's what we've been talking about tonight. But what I find staggering, since the time we started discussing this in our select committee, a lot of the discussions were around people delivering mail and newspapers and all that sort of stuff. Well, of course, I find out tonight that that's been deleted. And then we've got new provisions in the, existing ones, which I just ask you to reflect on. Why are we worrying about truck drivers' services delivering goods? And why are we worrying about market research and telemarketing? Now, that's one of those 12 that are in the Schedule 2. And I've just put it to you, we've come up with a list, and I'm not sure about the logic around some of that list, but I can't understand why we've actually dealt with probably the most potentially vulnerable workers, which are the ones out delivering the pamphlets. And the question to this, and this is what we talked about in the select committee, those people, and they did come to our select committee, the newspaper people, the people that often deliver those are the younger people, and I now know that the bill excludes under 16-year-olds, but it also doesn't deal with the issue about older people. And I heard my colleague talk earlier about the older person who can't walk as fast as a younger person. And we also heard about the people with disabilities. Again, we haven't mentioned that tonight. And part of this is about creating opportunities for jobs for them. Now, what this bill does, it has two things that really cut across the jib. And one is how the state is basically interceding between two parties namely contractors and employers. And I heard about the argument about the weight, Mr Speaker, Mr Chair.
Hang on, just give me a second. Chris Farfoy.
I move that the question be now put.